Good day, friends, and you're welcome back to the channel. We are going to discuss the concluding part of spontaneous generation, the theory of spontaneous generation. Now, in the first video, we discussed the theory of spontaneous generation, where we said that this theory tries to argue the fact that life can come from non-living matter, meaning that life can be generated from stones, from rivers, from water, from anything that is non-living, which negates the cell theory that says that cells arise from pre-existing cells. Now, there are two other signs. We already discussed the experiments of Francesco Redi in the other video. Now, for here, we're going to discuss the experiments of Lazzaro Spallanzani and Louis Pasteur. These are two scientists who tried to, disprove this theory of spontaneous generation by having their own experiments. Now, in their own experiments, Lazzaro Spallanzani, he did an experiment that was like a replica of what John Needham did, and Needham, we discussed Needham in the other video. But here, what he did was that he had these jars. He put liquid broth into glass jars, and then he heat these glass jars at very high temperature while keeping them very closely shut, and then he heat them to very high temperature and left them for a couple of days. After he came back after a couple of days, he showed there was no growth in any of these jars. He used this to negate the experiment, or to disprove the experiment which John Needham had done, by proving that the problem with John Needham's experiment was that he did not heat the glass jars, to very sufficiently high temperature to kill off all forms of life within the broth. So when Lazzaro did this in his own experiment, he killed off all forms of life in the glass jars, and he came back after many days. There was no growth within the glass jars. This showed clearly that there was no way that life could come from non-living matter, that non-living matter was dead, and that there's no way life can come from non-living matter except there's the introduction of life into that culture. Now, Louis Pasteur on his own, who is the second scientist we are discussing about, did what we call the swan neck experiments, which are popular, and some of the relics of this experiment are still being kept in top laboratories in Europe even until today. And what did he do? He had this round bottom flask that had swan necks, which are special S-shaped glass tubes, which he attached to the round bottom flask. Now, what he did was simple. He had series of these round bottom flasks, and in each of them he put nutrient broth that had meat extract, and then he heat them to a particular temperature where all forms of life must have been killed within this meat extract. And then one of the jars he left open, and then the other one he put the swan neck, this S-shaped glass tube, he put it on one of the jars. The other jar he left freely like that. And then after a couple of days, he came back to the experiment and he found out that for the ones that were exposed, just as expected, it is believed that oxygen or air, atmosphere, carries a lot of microorganisms, and there was microbial growth within the nutrient broth and meat extract that was already exposed. But for the round bottom flask that was carrying nutrient broth but that had a swan neck, this S-shaped tube, we found out that there was no growth of microorganisms in that culture. And so what was the reason for this outcome? Now, the reason was simple. That S-shaped glass does not allow the free flowing of air and oxygen through it, and so the nutrient broth in the round bottom flask remain completely unharmed and unchanged, because air, which carries microorganisms, and then insects or houseflies, were not able to come and perch on the broth, so the broth remained without any sign of life. This was an experiment that was conducted by Louis Pasteur, which we call the swan neck experiment, and it was used to disprove the theory of spontaneous generation. So both Lazzaro and Louis Pasteur were able to disprove this theory of spontaneous generation. Thank you for listening to this class, and have a wonderful day.